Well, blessed Friday to you as we come with your daily encouragement. And today is the third day of Christmas. It is also the day we honor Saint John. Now, we might say, well, what does Saint John have to do with Christmas? Well, he also told a Christmas story, but a story that isn't as epic like as Mary and Joseph or even the visit of the wise men that are found in Matthew. Mark just skipped it altogether, this beginning origin story. Just had John the Baptist appear and then Jesus appeared. But for John, he talks about a more philosophical thing going on. That Jesus had existed before he was born, that the Son of God, the Word of God, was actually what was manifested in Jesus. God existed, but we would not know of God's existence without words. Just as we can exist. But if I came onto the screen, even with just my face, people might wonder, are you just speaking? Can you speak? If you can speak, then I seem to kind of lose my interaction with people, and that's what happens when we lose our speech. But in John, we have the God who speaks. And when God speaks, he speaks his word. And John says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Let's hear the words of John chapter 1. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Now I'm going to skip to verse 14, where we have the Christmas story according to John. "And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, 'This is the one whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." So, in other words, John has a Christmas story. And we honor John today because it's usually the date of the person's passing. Now, John is an interesting characteristic because of all the apostles, he's the one that did not die in a violent way. He was a person that lived out his life in exile according to tradition in the Isle of Patmos. And there are some of even the church fathers that have a strong connection to John. There is the great church father Irenaeus, who lived in South France. He had been a person who remembered hearing testimonies of Polycarp, who had seen John face to face. And so there is a definite connection between John, Polycarp, and Irenaeus, one of my favorite of the church fathers, because they had a connection about some questions about faith that were not necessarily explicitly stated in the Bible. And I always think that that's an important thing, is that through some of the other writings, we can have some insights into how we can apply our Christian walk. But what can we learn from John that we didn't learn from the other stories of Christmas? We learn that Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, had an existence beforehand as the Word of God. What God speaks, what God made known. God could have existed beforehand, but when God speaks, God makes himself known and communicates not only his will to us, but his will to nature and the things around us. We have that already in Genesis chapter 1. God did not create using hands, God creates using words, and specifically the word of Jesus. And the good news here, as it is in Christmas, is that God did not just speak and decide to not speak anymore, that God just speaks in mysterious ways and we just get to speculate about it. There are some things that we might say are on the left hand side of God that we can speculate about. But in God's right hand is the message of Jesus, who came in flesh and dwells among us. Jesus, the one who reveals God's heart. And it is through Jesus, the Word, that we can find Jesus, the testimony, on this, our third day of Christmas. So while appreciate the visit of the shepherds to Mary and Joseph in the inn or the guest house of Kevin, also appreciate the story of the wise men coming to visit the baby Jesus at Epiphany. But don't forget John's testimony that God was working through Jesus as a word that became flesh and dwells among us and is coming to us this Christmas, this year. God bless you today. I invite you to join us for worship this coming Sunday at Central and East. It's the same worship service. It is Lessons and Carols. We'll be singing the great hymns and stories of faith. So I invite you to join us for that. It is a great way to celebrate the season, which is the 12 days of Christmas. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.